Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host, Jason Sunkel. It is a very somber evening here in Cleveland, Ohio. The Cavaliers have done the unthinkable and traded for the most despised player in Hoopheads pod history, James Harden.
I, Mike, now that you're retired, I was thinking about this today. Now that you're retired, I think what you should go back to and find all of the clips of us making comments about James Harden and compile them. And we just next Tuesday we just release a megapod of us reacting. Like I think it would be really awesome for us to react. I was thinking about how I could pull this off in like the time span, but then I kind of started working on doctoral work and stuff. So I was like, that's not happening. But like going back and pulling quotes from like episodes from like a year ago, from 6 years ago of us just talking about James Harden and how we never wanted him to be on our team. And now this is what happened. I would really, if you have time for that project, Mike, I don't know if you do, but if you have time somehow for that project, or maybe I'll go back and try to find a few clips of different James Harden quotes. Now that Apple Podcast has like all the timestamps and stuff, maybe we can find quotes and just react to them a week after James Harden. When I texted that to you last night, you and I said I literally was climbing into bed and I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna doom scroll Twitter for a few minutes, and I see this text that James Harden for Darius Garland swap was being considered. My brain started to like. I did not sleep well last night, Mike. I want you to know I did not sleep well last night because I was thinking of all the things that we've said about it's not enjoyable to watch. It's not going to be fun to watch. If he would not be fun to watch him to play basketball for your team, how could you ever want him to be on your team? Listen, he's going to put up stats in the regular season. Listen, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if the Cavs rip off this. I mean, who knows if the Cavs have other moves to make for sure. I think there's something other things that possibly, and we can talk about that later. But who would you be surprised, Mike, if I said to you the Cavs are the 2 seed in the East because James Harden is productive, Donovan Mitchell's productive, whatever other players are on our team are productive? Would you be completely floored if I told you right now the Cavs were the 2 seed in the East when the season ended?
No.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. We're gonna get disenfranchised. Maybe you and I might become James Harden apologists at some point. Listen, okay, Mike, I'm going to swear an oath. This is never going to happen. This is never going to happen, Mike. But I'm going to just put this out there. If the Cleveland Cavaliers were to somehow win an NBA championship with James Harden on the roster, will you become a James Harden apologist if they were to somehow do it? If I'm
I don't think you could apologize for what has happened thus far in the first 17 years of his career. If somehow James Harden becomes an integral part of a Cleveland Cavaliers championship, I'm guessing that if that were to somehow happen, that James Harden would, against incredible, insurmountable odds, have played well in big games over the course of 4 playoff series in order for that to happen. I don't think I would be able to unapologetically say that James Harden has now become the most clutch player in the league, my most favorite player in the league. But if somehow that were to happen, and I'm putting the odds of it happening at 0, so I don't think that I'm going to have to worry about whatever scenario we're describing here. But if somehow he were to turn his career around, it would be the most remarkable turnaround in NBA history if somehow the Cleveland Cavaliers trading for James Harden leads to an NBA championship. And I guess I still put the odds no matter what happens at 0%, but we can
if
talk
they
about
win an
some of
NBA
the
championship, you're
potential.
still putting it at 0%.
They're not winning an NBA championship. There's no possible way. We can talk about some of the things that I guess could be coming next that could potentially mitigate the James Harden problem in the playoffs. But barring additional moves, this current version of the team with James Harden in place of Darius Garland has zero chance of winning the NBA championship. Maybe there are more moves to come, and we'll talk about that. But this iteration of the team for the next whatever number of hours until the trade deadline, if we see if this is the final roster that they're going to head into the playoffs with, this roster as currently constructed has zero chance of winning the NBA championship. And they might have zero chance of winning second round playoff series.
Okay, so I guess so. Here's my question, Mike. Okay, so clearly this trade was spawned by several things. So we can talk about the pieces and parts. So the first piece would be the uncertainty with Darius Garland. Okay, and I had heard a report like 2 or 3 days ago that they were talking about fitting a metal plate for him to wear in his shoe to protect his toe, and I'm like, what in the glory heck is this? Like, this is ridiculous to protect the toe. Are you? This is like Derrick Rose 2.0. Derrick Rose was made of glass for a few years. Like, this is a ridiculous theory. So like this is going to actually fix it. So like obviously Darius Garland's injury, kind of injury situation. I don't even know what else to call it over the last year, less than a year, but the last year ish led to that's part one. Part two, there's been rumors that Mitchell. Now, once again, he's been pretty quiet in all things considered. Like, he's never complained about like this roster is not good, and maybe he's still doing stuff behind the scenes, but he's never seemingly been that guy where he's like he's always talked up the guys, he's always talked about the guys, he's always been like we've got to play better as a team. He doesn't point at one person, he doesn't say one thing. But the rumor mill was that Mitchell had made it abundantly clear that he would not sign an extension if the Cavs don't progress this season. Now, what does that progress mean? Does that mean getting past the second round? Does that mean getting to the Eastern Conference Finals? Does that mean making it to the NBA Finals and losing, getting swept? Like what does progression show? Okay, clearly we could talk about what that looks like too. And then the third thing is the money situation that the Cavs find themselves in, and possibly trying to get under the second apron. Now, this doesn't really help them very much, but it does give them a little bit of flexibility. I think, I think the key here, Mike, is if this tanks in the next 3 months, right? If this tanks in the next 3 months, Harden does not have to be on this team next year, which gives the Cavs a little bit of cap flexibility. I don't know about how much. I don't know what that looks like exactly, because I am not the cap doctor. I'm not, Sport Track and I don't know any of that stuff. So what I can say is this: I know that Garland is pretty much locked in. Like, we can't do anything with him. Harden's not guaranteed anything past this year, but the team can. I mean, they as long as the team was to waive him by, I think, June 11th was the date, then they don't have to pay him anything next year, and he's a free agent. So is giving up Garland like, so that's the other piece of this whole thing. Like, they're unsure about Garland's injury. They're trying to clear money. Is the possible play here that even if this Harden thing doesn't work out, we can go after someone else in the offseason? I don't know what that part of it, if that played any kind of role. So I know I just kind of threw like four things at you, but those were the four pillars of reasoning. And obviously the East is weak this year. Um, you know, I think I'm willing to say this, and as much of a James Harden basher, I think that you probably would agree with this. I don't know. I don't know for certain. But I think James Harden, the player, is better than Darius Garland, the player, in theory. Would you agree with that statement? I'm not talking about fit or anything. I'm just saying James Harden, the player, is better than Darius Garland, the player. True?
In theory, I think offensively, and we've said it before, that in the regular season, what James Harden is capable of doing statistically, I think far surpasses whatever Darius Garland could potentially do statistically on your team in the regular season as a scorer, as a distributor, on the offensive end of the floor, for sure. I think if you flip it around and talk about the defensive end of the floor, look, one of the things that I've always said about this Cavs team is that it's really difficult to have a teeny tiny backcourt with two guys who are both small, and neither one of them are very good defenders. Darius Garland, I will say, at least last year and into this season, when he's been healthy, he's been at least able to compete on the defensive end of the floor. James Harden doesn't really compete on the defensive end of the floor. And I think if we're expecting him to do that here in Cleveland during a playoff run or a potential championship run, to expect that Harden is suddenly going to play defense at 38 years old, I just don't think that that's going to be the case. So, in a vacuum, is James Harden a better player than Darius Garland? I would say yes. But unfortunately, we're not playing seasons or playoffs in a vacuum. And my eyes can't unsee what I've seen over and over and over again in the playoffs from James Harden. And I think it goes back to, look, I want to address each one of your points in a second, but I think to me, what this trade says more than anything else is, and I think here is where I can disagree with a lot of what went on in terms of the thinking about this trade, because if you're trying to win a championship, which I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are, I just don't see. I tweeted it out. If James Harden is the answer to your question, then you're asking the wrong questions. And if the Cleveland Cavaliers are really trying to win an NBA title this year, which I think they are, then adding James Harden does nothing for you except maybe improve your seeding in the regular season. When it comes to playoff time, it's not helpful. Now, is James Harden more helpful than an injured Darius Garland who can't play in the playoffs? Maybe. Or maybe he hurts you even more because you think you can depend on him and then you can't. But I think the greater point here, and it kind of sort of umbrellas everything that you said, is that this front office, this coaching staff, Dan Gilbert, whoever ultimately is making the decision, Kobe Altman, I think what they did, and I think it's the same thing that you and I have done on this podcast, is you look at this team, you look at the last 3 years, how they've performed in the playoffs from a physical toughness standpoint, from a mental toughness standpoint, from an injury standpoint, from what is this team? And they made the assessment over the last couple of weeks that this particular version of the roster with the quote big four of Garland, Allen, Mobley, and Mitchell is simply not good enough to win an NBA championship. And I think they're right. And so once you make that assessment, that we're in a season where it's kind of at least NBA finals or bust, I think, for the Cavs this year after winning 64 games last year and then going out in the second round of the Pacers. Once you make the determination that this team can't win a championship as constructed, then you start looking around and you say, what can we do? And clearly they're up against the second apron, so they're limited in what their options are. And so this opportunity to snag James Harden somehow comes to pass. And so they make that decision. And so I don't disagree with the idea that this team's not good enough to win a championship. I think after last season and the series against the Pacers, I came to that same conclusion that this particular roster just doesn't have the mental and physical makeup to be able to win a title. And so then you start looking at what changes can you make. And this change, as you said, I think in a vacuum, you could say that James Harden's a better player than Darius Garland. James Harden is also 12 years older than Darius Garland. And I do think that
Yeah, it's the
you
first. This
talked
is the
about the
first trade.
flexibility.
This is Mike. This is the first trade. I saw Nate Duncan, I think, tweeted this out. It's the first trade in NBA history that a player for a play, one for one player has been made that it's been the age gap has been 10 or more.
I believe it. And I think, look, I can understand to some degree why the Cavs wanted to get off Darius Garland. The injury history, they obviously know more about the toe than anybody else does. Darius is clearly going to have to pass a physical before the trade officially goes through, which I'm assuming that he's going to be able to do since the trade was announced and it's clearly a big deal on the NBA landscape. So I would assume that he's going to be able to pass his physical. But I think the Cavs clearly have concerns about, can this guy stay healthy over the entirety of his career. I also think that the fit with Donovan Mitchell, I already talked about it on the defensive end of the floor, on the offensive end of the floor. It's never been perfect. Like, I don't feel like Garland and Mitchell amplified one another and made each other better. Even when they were at their absolute best, it still felt a little bit like they were kind of trying to stay off of one another's toes. And so it does, in a way, free up Darius Garland when he goes to the Clippers, and he's going to have the ball in his hands when he's healthy, which I think will be a good situation for him. For the Cavs, as far as that goes, I do think breaking up the small backcourt is a positive. Again, I'm not sure I would have done it with James Harden, and we can get into plenty of the reasons why. But you're right that in a vacuum, Harden is probably a better player than Garland.
Hey, Mike, this whole transcript on this Apple podcast is just fantastic. Okay, here we go. This is from February 14th, 2024. Mike cleansing quote. This is good. And then obviously the James Harden piece of this. We've said it ad nauseum. Anybody who listens to us on a regular basis knows that, to me, James Harden is a fraudulent superstar. Then maybe James Harden plays 2 good games in a 7-game series, and the other 5 games he stinks, and maybe it doesn't matter. But I think it will matter, and I'm kind of with I'm out on the Clippers. This was you 2 years ago about James Harden, Mike. I'm gonna keep trying to find quotes, direct quotes about Harden. I mean, we've talked about it.
I know
It's
I
just
have a long I know I have a long rant somewhere that's like a 3-minute, 4-minute soliloquy on my distaste for James Harden. So it's out there. Let's put it that way. Anybody who wants to find it can certainly
yeah.
find
I
it
can
on
only go.
the
I can
internet.
only unfortunately I can only go back 2 years on Apple Podcasts. It does not let me go any further back than that. So I'm back to 2/4/2024, and I cannot find any more. But I'll see if I can find any more good quotes from you as we're talking here. So I guess, Mike, here's my question for you. Honest assessment. What is the ceiling for the Cavs now? If the roster stays currently constructive, what do you think the ceiling of the Cavs is as the roster is currently constructed? If they make no more moves.
I mean, the East is horrible. So I've said it numerous times this season on the podcast that I'm so interested to see who represents the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, because I have no idea what the path for that team will look like in order to get there, because I don't think any of these teams are very good, quite honestly. And I think whichever team from the East gets to the finals is going to get annihilated by whoever comes out of the West. So let's start there. I mean, here's what I'll say. I don't think that if this team, as constructed, where is James Harden in the offensive hierarchy for the remainder of the regular season for this team? I think the answer to that is that James Harden is probably number 2 on this team. And honestly, he probably has the ball more than anybody else on the team moving forward. I think he has the ball in his hands more than Donovan Mitchell does for the rest of the season. That doesn't mean he's going to score more than Mitchell and that Mitchell's going to get less opportunity, but I do think that James Harden is going to have the ball the most. He's clearly going to be the second leading scorer on this team. And so when you look at a situation where you're then going to be depending upon him, what's Harden going to average for the rest of the year? Right now, he's averaging like 26 a game. Is he going to average 26 a game for the Cavs for the rest of the season? I think there's a fairly decent chance that that happens. And so then all of a sudden you're going to get to the playoffs, and just like the quote that you pulled out from a second ago, if you play a 7-game series, he's probably going to have 2 games where he gets 35 or 40, and then he's going to have 5 games where he gets 8 or he gets 12 or he shoots 2 for 19 or whatever. And I don't know if you can survive that from your second leading scorer in a playoff series. I just don't. I think this team, as constituted, I think their ceiling is the Eastern Conference Finals, and I think even that I'm giving them probably way too much credit.
All right, Mike,
Do you
I
think
found
it's
another
more than
good
that?
one. This is another good one. No, I think you're right. You're probably right. You're right. I think you're accurate. I think you know I think I could talk myself into Eastern Conference Finals, but that's as far as I could probably talk myself into because the East is so terrible. Okay, but Mike, I found another good quote. This is not quite the soliloquy that you were talking about, but this is the James Harden free throw soliloquy that you made. This was after LeBron scored his 40,000th point. I pointed out atop that he had made more free throws than LeBron James had, and he said, no one enjoys James Harden foul hunting, but I've said that before on the podcast that I think the ability to draw fouls is an underrated skill. And there are some guys who are just good at it. And there are some guys who just aren't. And if you're a player that's good at being able to draw fouls, that's a huge weapon to have in your bag. And Harden obviously has it. And clearly at some point it's gone a little overboard. And we've seen all the highlights. You sent me one the other day where he was falling down without even getting touched trying to sell a foul call. And there's been plenty of points in his career where he's gotten to the line where probably hasn't gotten fouled. And like I said, nobody necessarily enjoys watching that or wants that to be part of the game. But the fact that it's a skill that you have makes you a better offensive player, no question. But it's still so terrible to watch. Well, guess what, Mike? We're going to get to watch a lot more of that now. I hope you're excited. I hope you're ecstatic. I hope you're pumped up because if he plays tomorrow night, you can guarantee that he is foul baiting Kawhi Leonard. He is foul baiting someone on the Clippers. He's going to do so much nonsense. And it is going to be painful to watch, but at the same time, I will be cackling just because we know exactly how this is going to go. It's going to be painful, painful, painful to watch. And the bottom line is this: he is a great offensive player and he knows how to do stuff in the regular season. But the second we get to the playoffs, it's terrible. And we are going to say this a lot. We are going to continue to say this. We are going to continue to talk about his playoff statistics and how terrible he's been. His record in the playoffs is 90-83 with 130 games that he started. He in those games, I'm trying to, oh, come on. In those games, oh, it doesn't tell you how many, what's his average points are? That's dumb. Come on, get your stuff together. Get your stuff together. In the playoffs, he's shooting 42% from the field. He's shooting 34% from behind the arc. He is shooting at the free throw line 87%. I can respect that. That's 87% from the free throw line in the playoffs. That's respectable. In the in the playoffs, Mike, he's taken almost 1,300 free throws in 130 games. That means he's averaging 10 free throws a game. Okay, so that probably means the point totals are slightly stratified because he's shooting 10 free throws a game and he's making 87% of those, right? So that's stat padding right there. I don't know. Like in my heart of hearts, do I want this to work? Of course I do. It's the Cavs. We're talking about a team that I've rooted for since I was, able to watch basketball and watch basketball. But I don't see how this is going to work. I just don't, unless transition time, Mike. Unless we can make another move. And there has been rumors that the Cavs are not done. Do you have anything to say before we talk about what potential moves could be made or the potential people? Do you anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we still need to hit on here. Let's go back to
Okay.
the money part of it, right? I think James Harden signed a 2-year deal with the Clippers, and I believe, and I keep trying to find it. I saw it in one of the articles that was up earlier, but I can't seem to find the exact fact. But I know that Harden had a 15% trade kicker, so he had to waive that to some extent because the Cavs were in the second apron, so he had to reduce the bonus from 2.3 million to like $250,000 according to Bobby Marks. And I also know that next year's contract, I believe, is not guaranteed. So I think if I want to say maybe 13 million of it. I remember reading that somewhere that 13 million of it is guaranteed. And obviously Darius Garland has, I believe, 3 more years beyond this one. So the Cavs, as you said off the top, did get a little flexibility both this year I guess, next year. And moving forward from there, if they want to be able to make some changes, if this thing doesn't work with Harden, they could just bid him adieu at the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. And rather than having Garland tied up for a long period of time. So I think there's some money flexibility there that makes sense. I guess before we go through to some of the other potential moves that the Cavaliers could make, I want to go back to the genesis of the overarching principle of this trade, which is that this team, as it was constituted prior to the Harden for Garland trade, isn't good enough to win a title. And I think by the Cavs front office making that decision, I think it's the right one. I mean, I think it's the right judgment on this team that it was not good enough to win a championship. And I don't think that was going to change. I don't think that even if all four of the core guys were healthy, I still don't think that it's a championship team. And to quote us on the podcast again, something that we've been saying over and over and over again is we don't think this team can win a title until Donovan Mitchell is the second best player. We were under the assumption that that second best player to become the first best player would be Evan Mobley. And we saw Mobley take big steps last year. This year, I would say he's plateaued. I don't think he's gotten worse necessarily, but he definitely did not take another leap forward this year the way that he did last year, as evidenced by his not really even being considered a snub for the Eastern Conference All-Star team this year. There really wasn't much discussion of Evan Mobley being on that team at all. And so now you look at it, you say, all right, you bring in James Harden. He's now probably, I don't know, is he the second best player? But Mitchell's still your best player. And so I don't think you've changed the calculation as far as does this bump Mitchell down a slot where maybe on a championship team, he's that really, really good second banana. I don't know. Can he be the first banana? He hasn't proven that because they haven't been able to get out of the second round. But here's my question, Jay, and this is what I can't take, and this is what is driving me insane. I would love to have been in the room as Kobe Altman and whoever else is making decisions. They're going back and forth and saying, we have to do something. What can we do? And somebody tosses out the name James Harden. And
All right, all
I'm
right.
sitting in
Hey,
the
Mike,
room, and my
just
question
are
is,
you Mike, Mike,
what?
Mike, Mike? Are you stealing Simmons' bit from Instagram? Because this is exactly Simmons' bit from Instagram. I sent it to you. Did you see it?
I didn't see it. I'm not. I'm. This is my. If this is a bit, it's original. I
You
did
and
not see
Simmons are
anything
this.
that Bill Simmons has done. So okay. So great minds think alike. All right. So anyway, let me continue on with my bit. So at what point, as we're sitting in the room, and I'm the assistant to this assistant GM, and I raise my hand and I say, fellas, what are we trying to get the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference? Is that our goal for the season, or are we trying to win an NBA championship? And if the answer that is given to me in the room is we're trying to win an NBA championship, then I don't know how you then come to the conclusion that James Harden is part of the solution to that question. Because as we've said over and over and over again, the track record in the playoffs is what it is. And sure, there are going to be James Harden supporters that can point out this good game he had in the playoffs, or he did this, or he did that. The bottom line is that he has consistently underachieved in big moments. And in almost every big game in the playoffs that he has played in his career, he has come up small. Small by his standards, but small by any standard measure of what an NBA superstar should do in a playoff setting. And so I get it that you're removing Darius Garland because of injury, and you say, well, at least Harden's going to play. And so maybe you're right. Maybe there's not a lot of downside. Maybe it does. Hey, let's swing for the fences, and then we can get off of James Harden a lot sooner than we could have got off Darius Garland. Maybe we don't think he's ever going to be healthy. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that you can just ignore 17 years of playoff history and say to yourself, this time it's going to be different. He's going to come through. He's going to give us what we need in big moments in the playoffs. Because again, it's not like this team doesn't need James Harden to sell tickets. This team doesn't need to be the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference in order to be able to make their way through the playoffs. The only thing that this team is trying to do is win an NBA championship. And I just can't, in my wildest dreams, imagine the conversation where somebody who has an intelligent basketball mind can make a legitimate argument that James Harden being on your team as, in this case, either the second or third most important player is going to go well for you in the playoffs. It doesn't make sense. Now maybe it does if you're going to tell me that there's another move to be made that's going to bring in a guy who bumps Donovan Mitchell down to the 3rd spot and bumps bumps Donovan Mitchell down to the 2nd spot and bumps James Harden down to the number 3 slot on this team, then maybe I can start to live with it. I still think that there had to be something else. I would have much rather rolled the dice. If this is all they're going to do, I'd much rather roll the dice with Darius Garland's health than James Harden's mental capacity to do anything in the playoffs. And that's just, I don't know. I just don't know how you can sit in that room and make that decision and with a straight face say, this guy's going to give us a better chance to win the title than the guy that we're shipping out the door, unless they know something about Garland's health that they think can sneak past the Clippers medical staff in a physical situation. And suddenly he's going to be whatever. He's going to pass the physical and then he's somebody else's problem. And who knows? Maybe they know more than we do. I just, 15 years of history tells me that playoff James Harden is not going to be one that I'm going to enjoy watching in a Cleveland Cavaliers uniform.
So I don't know. Are you ready? Let's talk about the candidates that could theoretically have been linked to the Cavs since I think that's where we're at now, right? Do you agree with that? It's kind of the transition point, Mike.
Let's talk about can we talk about the previous trade for a second? I guess we didn't really address that. Can we talk
Sure,
about the trade with Sacramento for a second?
sure. So the Cavs traded. Okay, so we got Harden, and we also got the guy who I never can pronounce his dang name right. So now I'm gonna have to can't talk about the guy from Peanuts. Dennis Schroeder, not Schroeder. It's Dennis Schroeder,
Schroeder. I
right?
like it. Schroeder.
Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis and some other 2-way player, and we gave up DeAndre Hunter. Now, a second that trade happened, okay, like we went back. I was thinking about when we first talked about the trade when we got Hunter last year. We talked about how he was the next theoretical Rodney Hood, right? The theoretical part of the DeAndre Hunter experience. And if you look at the analytics and the stats from his first few months in Cleveland, it was trending good, right? Like I remember us talking about, man, this is working out, this is great. And then the playoffs happened, and it went. And then the beginning of this season happened, and it went. And he had a really good game last week, and I was like, oh, why can't we have this DeAndre Hunter every single time? So at this point, okay, before the Harden trade is made, I am all in on this trade. I think it was a good move. I think Schroeder has proven to be a champion, right? He won the EuroLeague. He helped Germany this past summer, right? It was this past summer. He helped Germany compete. And he's played really, really well. He actually won the MVP. I'm not incorrect in that, right? That's accurate, right? He won the MVP in the EuroLeague. He's playing pretty good game. I mean, we played Sacramento a few weeks ago, and anytime he had the ball, that was his audition. I genuinely believe once that game happened, they're like, okay, this guy should be on our team. Like, let's get it, somehow figure it out. I think Keon Ellis. I don't like the theory and the thought about him playing the three as a 6'4" wing. Like, like that would be like me playing the wing in the NBA. I mean, I'm a little concerned about that. And I know he's got the wingspan and he's been doing it a little bit, but he's also been doing it for Sacramento, who's been terrible. So I don't know that I like that piece of the trade, but I think, the second that we got Schroeder as a guard, is whether it was insurance for Garland or kind of, I felt like there were more coming. I really felt like that was the first piece, because I felt like, once again, so now essentially here's my thoughts. Like, and maybe now I'm talking myself into this whole Harden situation, and maybe I need to pump the brakes a second here. But like, you're going to theoretically, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where you're not going to have two of those three players on the floor at the same time, right? You're going to start the game with Harden and Mitchell. Okay. Then the first guard off the bench is probably Schroeder. Okay. And then after that, like, you don't think he's the first guard off the bench? Craig Porter Jr.?
No, it's going to be Ellis or Merrill
Who?
still.
Okay. I mean, I guess you're right.
Here's why.
But
Because
you don't think he's,
here's why.
but go ahead.
Because here's why. Because I think Schroeder, one, undersized, two, not a defender. So there's no way you could play Schroeder and James Harden together. And if you play Schroeder and Mitchell together, then you're looking at just a worse version of the Garland Mitchell backcourt. If you play Keon Ellis, and I saw a stat somewhere, I can't remember the exact numbers, but there was some statistic showing that Keon Ellis had picked up opposing guards full court. He was one of the top 5, top 10 guards in the league in terms of picking up his player full court and making the guy work. And so I think the idea that Keon Ellis at 6'4", and you're right, he's not going to guard big wings. You're not going to have him guarding Kawhi. You're not going to have him guarding Jason Tatum. You're not going to have him guarding those kinds of guys. But at 6'4", and with his defensive prowess, he is a guy who, if you put him next to Harden or you put him next to Donovan Mitchell, at least you have one bigger guard with size, with wingspan, who is a defender. And then you still have his ability to shoot the ball from three as a catch and shoot guy, playing off of either Mitchell or Harden, which I like. And you were 100% spot on when I remember us talking about theoretical DeAndre Hunter and hearkening back to the days of theoretical Rodney Hood. And DeAndre Hunter, here during his time in Cleveland, when he first got here, theoretical DeAndre Hunter really did show himself on the floor. And I think during the time when he was a Cav that he shot 40% from three. But the problem with DeAndre Hunter is that his ability to impact the game with anything other than his catch and shoot threes was limited. Not much of a ball handler, not much of a facilitator, not a very good rebounder for a guy his size. Defensively, I think he's kind of a little bit all over the place. Probably not as good as his reputation was coming into the NBA in his first year or two. But I also don't think he was as bad as I've heard some people say post this trade, that he never really worked out defensively. I think he was fine defensively. I'd say he was maybe a slightly above average wing as far as a defender. But I also got to the point where I didn't really trust him, and I wasn't that sad to see him go. And I do think that bringing in Keon Ellis is a guy who is going to fit just because he brings a defensive profile that they don't really have. I think, look, the Lonzo experiment that I was super excited about heading into this season, I thought it was a huge upgrade.
And
Lonzo over Isaac
Mike,
Okoro. And
Mike,
I think at
Mike,
this
Mike,
point,
Mike, the
go ahead.
Lonzo Ball situation, Go back to our first 3 weeks of the episodes. We were talking about how great he looked. Like he was great in the first few games, and then it completely s hit the fan. Man, he's played terrible. He's terrible.
He hasn't been able to shoot the ball at all. I mean, he's a complete zero as far as being able to shoot the ball. And because he hasn't been able to shoot, it's mitigated some of the other things that he does well. And so now you look at the Cavs and you say, right, Keon Ellis is kind of taking the role that I think they anticipated Lonzo would have, which was bigger guy in the backcourt who could defend, move the ball, hit open threes. And Lonzo just hasn't been able to do that. But now you look at the Cavs backcourt and you're like, holy cow, we have way, way too many guards, right? You have Mitchell and Harden, you got Schroeder and Ellis, you got Merrill, you got Craig Porter Jr., you've got Tyrese Proctor, you've got Max Struess when he comes back, if you want to call him a guard. So you're talking 7 guys in the backcourt that, in all honesty, are guys that could play. And sometimes Jalen Tyson even could shift into the backcourt if necessary. So there's kind of a logjam at the back end of the roster. I know there was talk that maybe the Cavs would try to trade Lonzo and get off of some of his money. There is an opportunity here as we start to look ahead to, is there anything else to do? There's certainly guys that could be tradable or expendable that maybe weren't before. There's a logjam in the backcourt, I guess is the point here. And if there's more trades to be made, some of those guys can be packaged together in a deal for whatever. And again, I don't claim to know all the salary cap rules and where we are and how this Harden thing has affected our ability to aggregate salaries and do some of that stuff. But it still seems like, from everything that I've read and listened to, that after this trade has been made, that there is still opportunity for the Cavs to do more. So I like the Ellis pickup. Schroeder, I think, could have a role potentially, especially if there's injury. I mean, he's a veteran guy who has had a lot of success both in this league and internationally. And I wouldn't be afraid to have Dennis Schroeder come into a playoff game. I'd be much more afraid to watch James Harden play a playoff game than I would Dennis Schroeder. Let's put it that way.
So I don't know if you've seen like the Lonzo Ball's been rumored. The Charlotte Hornets have been interested in Lonzo Ball. I don't know if that's a coincidence or if that's just someone blowing smoke, but I have seen that from multiple people because obviously his brother is on that team. So Charlotte is supposedly interested. Now, I don't know what we would get back from Charlotte or if this would be a pure salary dump and situation. But that's one spot that I have seen Lonzo Ball being rumored to. That's really the only spot I've seen him rumored, and I think there might be other teams that we could get to buy, take care of that. But that's what I've seen with Lonzo Ball. And then I guess I'll delve into the other names that have been rumored and linked to the Cavs, and then we can talk about them one by one. The two main names that have been coming out are clearly Giannis and Anthony Davis. Now, I'm just going to start with Anthony Davis. I don't want any part of that business. I'm out of the Anthony Davis business. I'm out on that. I don't want anything to do with the Anthony Davis business. I wouldn't give up, like, I don't know, Thomas Bryant for Anthony Davis probably, because Anthony Davis is going to get hurt like 5 minutes into playing a game, and then we're going to be stuck with hearing about how he's going to get poked in the eye and it's going to be like he needs to be taken to the Cleveland Clinic and have major surgery or something. I guess this would be a good place for him to go. We have some really world-class hospitals and places for him to be seen because he's always injured. Now, Giannis, I'm definitely in on. Now, I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we willing to more? I mean, we already got rid of Garland. Okay, are we willing to give up on Mobley to take Giannis? I think if I'm Kobe Altman and I just made this trade Garland for Harden, I think I have to be willing to give up Mobley for Giannis. And I know Giannis has been injured, but Mobley's also been injured. Mobley's been out twice with the same calf injury that Giannis is currently out with, and Mobley is also currently out. So I think if I'm Kobe Altman and the Milwaukee Bucks agree to this deal and we're not the ones holding it up, I think, you know, the rumors that I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen the same, but it's been Mobley and Strus in a pick of some sort for Giannis. I think, you know, if I'm Milwaukee, I'm excited about the upside of Mobley. Which, by the way, Mobley is still probably my favorite Cav. So I will be very sad about the Mobley situation if he gets traded. I'm torn because I think, I was really big on Mobley, and when the draft happened, I really wanted the Cavs to take Mobley. I thought we got so lucky that other teams did not take him higher than we took him. Um, I was really, really high on him. Uh, I think he has the potential, but I've also seen a plateau of sorts, and we have to, if I'm given the chance to get Giannis, and if their asking price is Mobley, great. I guess I'll have to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't feel great about it, but I also feel like if we don't have Giannis on this team, there's too much relying on Kevin. I was about to say Kevin Durant. Too much relying on James Harden to help win this team a championship. If you have Mitchell and you have Giannis and you have Harden and you have Allen and you have all the other parts, I feel way better about this whole situation. Honestly, I think the Giannis situation is the only way that really makes me wrap my head around the reasoning behind the Harden trade. I don't think that there is any world that the Harden trade in a vacuum makes any kind of sense for the long term. I don't think this is convincing Donovan Mitchell to stay. I don't think. I think taking a huge leap and getting Giannis is is the move that they'd have to make in order to, if you're really having to convince Donovan Mitchell to stay in Cleveland. I genuinely believe that the Giannis trade is the trade. I don't think this Harden trade is making Mitchell go, oh, I really love the idea of that I'm going to play next to a guy that has way more facial hair than me and dribbles the basketball a lot. It's not happening. So I know I just talked a lot there. I'm out on the Anthony Davis. If we can somehow get Giannis, you got to push all your chips on the table at this point. And you know what? Someone else also that a friend of mine also brought up the point that Dan Gilbert's health. Are the Cavs pushing all their chips in, knowing that Dan Gilbert is not in good position to be the owner of this team for 3+ years? Are they just like, okay, Dan Gilbert wants a championship before he passes, or before he's not able to even like be like aware of his surroundings? Like that was another point that I didn't even like think of that piece of it all. Like maybe he's just like put it all on the table. I want another championship before I die, essentially, or before I can even like not know what's going on. You know, like I said, I don't know that to be accurate, but it was a point that was made. So, and I don't want to be told that I'm being slanderous and saying that Dan Gilbert's in poor health. It just, someone said it, and I just thought it was kind of made me think a little bit.
All right, let me address the Anthony Davis piece of this first. I'm 100% with you that there's no way I would make any kind of a deal for Anthony Davis just as a result of his injury history. I think that you could, again, if you're sitting in the Cavs offices and you're trying to figure out, hey, who can we get? If you take the absolute apex healthy version of Anthony Davis, a guy who can roll to the rim, a guy who can attack and is athletic and does some of the things that Davis is capable of doing, and you pair him with James Harden, who has been one of the best, if not the best, pick and roll artist in the league for the last 15 years. And almost any big guy that he's ever played with, he has made them better because of his ability to play out of the pick and roll. And I think that Anthony Davis would be a perfect. Again, a healthy Anthony Davis would be a perfect partner for James Harden. And you could see the Davis Harden pick and roll on one side of the floor. You got Davis rolling. You got Donovan Mitchell playing on the second side, being able to attack out of that. It could make the Cavs a very, very potent offensive team. And that's to say nothing of what he would do on the defensive end of the floor. But again, the odds of you getting that guy for any length of time at a stretch is probably not going to happen. And then I have no idea what I'd be willing to give up for Anthony Davis. I would tell you that it would be a lot less than what I'd be willing to give up for Giannis. I certainly would be very, 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 very hesitant to give up Evan Mobley in a deal for the brittle Anthony Davis. I just don't see it. Again, the best version of Davis would be a really good fit on this team. But would he be a better fit than 23-year-old Evan Mobley? Would it be that much of an upgrade? I really don't think so. I think Anthony Davis at this point in his career is pretty similar as an offensive player to Evan Mobley. Maybe he's a little bit stronger. I think Mobley probably, in all honesty, despite the fact that Mobley's not a great outside shooter at this point, I think Mobley's probably a better outside shooter, 3-point shooter than Anthony Davis. And so I'm not really sure that the upgrade that I'd be getting there would be worth it. So I certainly, if you could give up something small for Anthony Davis, maybe. And again, I don't want to sign Anthony Davis to any kind of extension, so it seems unlikely that that deal would be made. On the other hand, Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think you have to start with the fact of what we've talked about when other teams were the teams that were maybe considering trading for Giannis, and that is with his injury history, with his calves, and the fact that he has missed multiple playoff seasons for the Milwaukee Bucks over the last couple of years since they won the title. That's concerning. If I'm giving up a whole bunch of stuff and I'm not 100% sure that this guy's going to be able to make it through 4 rounds of the playoffs, that leaves me a little bit concerned. On the other hand, we have seen Giannis win a title. We saw him put up 50 in a clinching game in the NBA Finals. When he's healthy, there is nobody that is more physical, driven, wants to win more than this guy. Maybe guys are his equal, but I really don't think there's anybody that you can say has more drive to win and be successful than what Giannis has. And I think if you put him in a new situation, whether that's here in Cleveland or whether that's somewhere else, I think you're going to see that competitiveness and that drive return to the highest level. Not that it wasn't, but you're going to see maybe it taken to another level again, just because he's going to be surrounded by other better players than the roster that he was given with and finished with in Milwaukee. So again, the fit with the Cavs, if you bring in Giannis Antetokounmpo, one, he clearly becomes now player one, which does what you and I have been asking for, thinking needed to happen for a long time, which is Donovan Mitchell becomes a very, very, very good number two on your team. And now you bump James Harden down to number 3. And now you start getting into the territory where if James Harden has 2 good games in a playoff series where he scores 30 plus, maybe those are the 2 games that you win that are unexpected because maybe Mitchell or Giannis has a slightly off game and Harden fills that void. And then in the other games where he occasionally throws up a stinker, maybe you don't really need him because Giannis goes for 40 and Mitchell goes for 35. And all of a sudden, if Harden has 10, it doesn't impact you nearly as much. And I do think that, look, Giannis likes to have the ball. Mitchell likes to have the ball. James Harden likes to have the ball. There would definitely be some work to be done by Kenny Atkinson and his staff to figure out how to make that work. But, man, the idea of having Giannis in a Cavs uniform and the opportunity to cheer for him, as much as my distaste for Harden says, ugh, I don't know how much fun it's going to be to watch this team. If suddenly you put Giannis into this mix, it becomes way more fun to watch. And as far as giving up Evan Mobley, I would agree with you that Mobley has been, since he's joined the Cavs, probably been my favorite player. Partly my favorite player based on how he plays, but also partly based on his potential and what I hope that he could become. And I know I've said it a couple times over the last year or two that my ideal version of Evan Mobley is he's 85% of Giannis going to the basket and handling the ball and doing all those kinds of things. And he's able to knock down threes and shoot from the outside better than Giannis could. And is he going to get there at some point? Maybe, maybe not. I have no idea. But if you could trade for Giannis, then you're getting the real thing. You don't have to try to hope that somebody else grows into and fills those shoes. And so if you can get Giannis and it's Mobley and Strus or whatever combination of other guys on the roster that you want, and then I'm assuming, I think we have one pick to trade, or maybe we have two that we could trade. Obviously, whatever picks we have would have to be in the trade. I think the interesting part here is what you have to look at if you're the Cavs and you're trying to figure out if you want to do this deal and if you can do this deal. And then think about it from Milwaukee's perspective. What does Milwaukee want from a Giannis trade? And if you're going to get back Evan Mobley and let's say one other player, and then, like I said, I can't remember if the Cavs have one pick to trade or two. Let's be optimistic and say they have two picks to trade. Is getting Evan Mobley, who was last year's second team All NBA, 23 years old, reigning Defensive Player of the Year. Is there a better player who's actually already in the league right now that Milwaukee can get in this trade than Evan Mobley? Is there somebody better that they could hope to get? And if you look at all the contending teams, I don't really think that any of the teams that have been mentioned as potential Giannis landing spots have a better player than Evan Mobley. If you're trading with the Knicks, would you rather have Towns or Mobley moving forward? I mean, come on, you'd rather have Mobley. Would you rather have Mikal Bridges? Would you rather have Anunoby? I think you'd rather have Mobley, right? So in San Antonio, would you rather have Mobley or Dylan Harper or Stephon Castle? As good as those two guys are, I still think Mobley at this point in his career is better. Who do you want from Houston? Who's Houston going to give up in a Giannis trade? Are they giving up Şengün? Would you rather have Şengün or Mobley? Maybe you could argue that you'd rather have Şengün. I think I'd probably rather have Mobley because of what he does on both ends of the floor and what his ceiling is. I guess my point here is you can go through all the teams that are potential contenders that might want Giannis that have stuff to trade. And I think Mobley is the best young player who's already in the league that they could get. And so then it's a question of how valuable are the draft picks, which are, again, unknowns, which could be much worse than Evan Mobley or could potentially land you a superstar in the draft, which, again, highly unlikely, but something that Milwaukee is, again, just like Cleveland, they're not going to be able to sign free agent guys to come to Milwaukee. So you've got to build it through the draft. And so I guess it comes down to, for me, the way that the Cavs get Evan, or the way the Cavs get Giannis Antetokounmpo is how much do the Milwaukee Bucks value Evan Mobley? Is Evan Mobley worth 2 or 3 first round picks in their mind to get him, as opposed to maybe they could get 4 picks from somebody else and a player who's not as good as Evan Mobley? Or could you get Mobley and 2 draft picks? I don't know if you're Milwaukee, what you do. I don't know what your thoughts are as far as Milwaukee's point of view.
The Milwaukee doesn't have any point of view other than there's no one better than Mobley that's available. Like that's genuinely the 100% truth. There's just nothing they can do. There's no one better. I think that the question that you have to ask yourself is, if I'm Milwaukee, do I really want to drag this out with Giannis any more than I already have? I really think that's the question that Milwaukee has to ask themselves, because I don't know I don't know if anyone's going to give you anything better than the ceiling that Mobley has for Giannis, even in the offseason. Maybe there's a team that'll come out of nowhere and it'll happen, and I just don't know. I think there was a funny tweet I saw, Mike, today that said that they were going to start rumors that Jimmy Haslam is going to trade Giannis to the Cavs to appease minority owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Myles Garrett, into not requesting a trade. That's pretty good, isn't it? Is that equal to, or not as equal to, the tree planting situation with Kawhi Leonard? Um, anyways, I, I I just don't know how much Milwaukee wants to drag this out. Like, do you wait? I mean, think back to last year, Mike, with the Garland situation. There had been rumors that Phoenix had reached out to the Cavs about trading Garland and someone else for Durant. There had been rumors of that, and it popped up. I didn't even remember that had happened until I was like reading stuff about it today. But Garland's stock has fallen. If Mobley continues to have these injuries, like I don't know if the Cavs, like, what the Cavs can get for him. So if you can pull this heist off, in my opinion, once again, who knows how long Giannis stays, but you're pushing all your chips on the table. If your goal is to win a championship, and you've got everything, all the other pieces, parts that you've made and you've done, you've traded and you've put in place, you would theoretically have Mitchell, Giannis, and James Harden on the same team. And I know we already had the big three of Irving, Durant, and Harden, but those three players don't really, the way that they theoretically play together would not be the same kind of fit that these three theoretically would have. Once again, all these are theoretical hypotheses. Okay, we're spitballing and basing it on what we know that each player is. I think Giannis is probably he's if he's healthy, he's just as good as almost anyone in the league, right? So I just think the bottom line is this: if the Cavs can make this trade, the Cavs are going to do it. It's just whether Milwaukee wants to risk it or not. That's the question.
Yeah, I don't know if Milwaukee wants to do it. I don't know what exactly they are looking for. I think that's a question that they're going to have to figure out. Do they value potential draft picks more? Do they value Evan Mobley or some other young player in the league that they project to be a potential super? How bad do they want to be this season? If you bring back Evan Mobley, how much can Evan Mobley carry that crappy Milwaukee Bucks roster and try to get them into the play-in? If you're Milwaukee, right, at this point, you just want to sit Giannis down, even if he stays, and you want to be as bad as you possibly can so that you ended up in a position where you and the Pelicans both end up with very, very high picks in this draft, so that when that swap takes place and Atlanta grabs New Orleans's pick or ends up staying with Milwaukee's pick, that both of those picks end up in the top 5, 6 picks in the draft. And then Milwaukee can still potentially get a guy who is going to be somebody that can be a franchise cornerstone for them moving forward. To me, I think that's the most important part of what's left for Milwaukee over the last 4 months in terms of their own team, is they want to finish as poorly as they possibly can so that they can try to keep a spot in somewhere in the top, whatever, 5, 6 of this draft, because as we know, their pick is going to be swapped out for that Pelicans pick, and Atlanta gets the better of those two picks. And so that's, to me, number one priority for Milwaukee. And then it still just comes down to, does Milwaukee value, if it's Evan Mobley and whatever draft compensation the Cavs can throw together, more than whatever other young player that another contending team can offer, along with
Hey,
whatever
Mike.
picks that team can offer. The Cavs clearly don't have as much in the way of volume of picks as some of these other teams. They don't have as much to offer as San Antonio, as Houston, as Oklahoma City, as Utah, although now Memphis, Brooklyn has a ton of picks. Uh, what does Giannis want? How much does Milwaukee ask him, hey, where do you want to go? Who does Giannis want to play with? Does he want to play with Donovan Mitchell? Does he want to go and play with Jalen Brunson in New York? Does he want to go and play with Wemby? Does he want to go and play with Durant in Houston? What's the destination of where Giannis wants to go? And does that even matter? Do the Bucks take that into any kind of consideration? And so I just don't know exactly what is going to happen there. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work. So it will be very, very interesting to see what the Milwaukee Bucks end up doing. And I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what Milwaukee chooses to do. And I think if you're the Cavs, you have to really think twice and consider whether or not you want to deal Evan Mobley. And I think ultimately you said it that at this point, making the Harden trade with Garland in that deal, who is 12 years younger than James Harden, you have now pushed all your chips into the center of the ring with the idea that you're trying to win. And I think ultimately, as a fan of the team, what I have to think about is the fact that Giannis is going to give me the best opportunity to win an NBA championship. And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to do. And I can continue to build this theoretical team with the core four that I just don't think is good enough. I don't think they were ever going to be good enough. I think mentally, physically, that team was not going to be a championship team. And so as a result of that, I think despite the idea of trading for James Harden, I don't like that. I don't think that I would have made that deal. And again, our disdain for James Harden and the way he plays has been well documented. But at the same time, I still believe that if the Cavs were to be able to make a deal for Giannis by including Mobley, whatever draft capital they can, and whatever other player or players they might need in order to fill in the remainder of this trade. At this point, from my perspective, ultimately the reason why all these teams are playing, including the Cavs, is to try to win a title. And you could maybe argue that by making this deal, you're closing the window or making the window a little bit shorter, but it's really hard to win one. And you look back at the Cavs from 2015 to 2018, and you go to four straight finals, and you're very, very close. And it's a pretty big window that not many teams get an opportunity to go to the finals four times. And even with that, you only win one. And I'm not convinced that the group we had previously was going to win any. And so if you can push all your chips into the middle of the table and end up with a team that has Mitchell, Giannis, and okay, James Harden, and then whatever else you have left to fill out the remainder of the roster, I think Mitchell and Giannis is a pretty good place to start for a team that could potentially win an NBA title. Let's put it this way. If Giannis comes to the Cavs, I think you asked me about what the team's ceiling is right now with James Harden. I said probably Eastern Conference Finals at best, and I would probably bet against that. If you put Giannis on this team and he's healthy, I think now you're looking at a team that potentially could win the NBA title. I still think you'd probably pick somebody out of the West, and who knows what this team would look like in terms of how it would gel. But like I said, I like the idea of Harden running screen roll with Jared Allen or running screen roll with Giannis, and Mitchell being your backside creative guy, being able to attack. And again, as you said, you'd have one of those two guys on the floor at all times. You got some versatility now as far as defensively with Keon Ellis, what you could do there. Giannis obviously is a very, very good defender. So you're not losing much if you end up dealing Evan Mobley out in a potential Giannis deal. As bad as Harden is defensively, I still think that the Mitchell Garland backcourt defensively was a difficult one against good playoff teams. And I still think when Mitchell and Garland, or sorry, when Mitchell and Harden are on the floor potentially in a playoff series, that's going to be a problem. But you do have some flexibility that Keon Ellis maybe gives you in terms of size in the backcourt that you didn't have before. So I'm with you. I think if the opportunity presents itself to get Giannis, I think you have to do whatever it takes to make that happen. Go with your big three of Giannis, Mitchell, and Harden, and fill out the rest of the roster with whatever you got and see what's going to happen. Because again, the one thing I keep coming back to is I just don't think the old version of this team could win a title. And maybe this team can't either, but let's at least
Gotta,
give it a shot and mix
yeah,
it up because I just don't think the old group could do it.
Mike, that was a great job. I don't even know you know I got kicked out for a good 5 minutes there. You did a great job, Mike. You were ranting. You were doing a great job. I'm so proud of you because I did not hear about 5 minutes of your spiel because I got kicked out. So great job, listeners. You wouldn't even know that if I didn't say it. I'm proud of you, Mike. The bottom line, once again, this goes back to we don't think that this. I think I'm going to encapsulate everything that we've said today. We don't believe in James Harden as as a difference maker for making this team a championship contender. Probably a better regular season record than we're going to have if nothing else gets done. But once the postseason, wipe that out the window. It's not going to change. If the Cavs are to make another move like Giannis, there's a higher ceiling opportunity for the Cavs. What does that look like? Who knows? Depends on how it gels. Depends on how everything comes together. But the bottom line is this. We are in agreement that I don't think the Cavs as a core four are going to. Oh, Mike, I just realized something. I have a poster of the core four in my classroom. Oh no. I'm gonna have to like put James Harden's face over Darius Garland's body. Oh God. I'm gonna have to look at that guy. I'm gonna have to look at that guy every day now. Anyways, I'll have to figure that out tomorrow. That's a tomorrow problem. The core four was not winning the NBA championship as it was currently constructed or as they were currently playing. We will just have to see how this works out. And I think I'm not speaking for Mike here, but if anything else crazy happens over the next 48 hours, you can probably bank on us doing an emergency pod either tomorrow or Thursday. I don't know what our interview situation is on Thursday. Do we have 2 interviews on Thursday, Mike?
We do.
All right, so it'll be an extremely late night pod on Thursday if we have to do an emergency pod. An emergency pod is going to reason that we have an emergency pod is if probably if a Cavs or a top 10 player in the NBA gets traded. I think that's probably what will constitute an emergency pod. If we didn't even talk about any of the other trades that happened. I guess we'll have to kind of talk about trade fallout next week if we don't do anything this week. Kind of just trade fallout and talk about 1 week reflection on how the trades that have been made look after 1 week. But I guess I think I feel like when we talked tonight, we said we wanted to focus on the Cavs if the Harden trade happened. We've done that job. Um, I don't think any of the other trades really, are monumentally shifting the NBA. Jaren Jackson getting traded and Vucevic getting traded and Utah. I don't exactly know what their plan is now, but I don't know that Danny Ainge knows what the plan is in Utah. But I think those are things that we can talk about at a later time. I think we've said a lot tonight, Mike. Is there anything you just want to say about the Cavs or anything else in brevity? Do you want to talk about Shedeur Sanders throwing a pick on his first possession in the Pro Bowl? Like, I don't know if you want to talk about any of that, but go ahead.
No, I don't want to talk about Shador, but Utah quickly. I don't. I don't really understand the acquisition of Jaren Jackson. I know that they traded out 3 first-round picks in that deal as well. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me that your team is going to be marketing Jaren Jackson Jr., Kessler, Ace Bailey, and Keontae George. Again, I'm not sure what you're trying to do, but I don't think that team is winning an NBA title. From Memphis's perspective, it makes sense, right? Clearly got off the Desmond Bain contract. I'm sure they're trying at this point to get off the John Morant contract. They get off the Jaren Jackson contract. They get back number one picks. I think they have, I want to say, 12 or 14 number one picks now over the next 7 years. So they are going into what looks to be a deep rebuild. And again, when you do that, what you're hoping for is some lottery luck at some point, and you end up getting a guy who becomes your franchise cornerstone. It looked like they had done that with John Morant, and unfortunately, things went south. We've said it a bunch of times on here. There's probably no guy whose star turned faster than John Morant's did, from a guy who potentially could have been the face of the league and was averaging 27 a game, was an all NBA player, to a guy now who it looks kind of like nobody wants him. And so a sad turn of events for the Memphis Grizzlies and their fans, but they're again going into a rebuild. I don't really understand Utah doing what they did. I know they had a plethora of picks as well that eventually got to use those picks to trade for somebody. To me, that somebody would not have been Jaren Jackson Jr. I probably would have waited to see what else might have shaken loose. But again, Utah's kind of in a similar position to a lot of other small market teams, that it's not a place where a lot of young NBA players want to go play. So sometimes you have to strike and make the move and make a deal that's in front of you instead of waiting for the perfect deal, because that perfect deal may never come and you may never get a chance to build your team. So that was kind of a strange trade to me. I guess from Utah's perspective, I totally understand it. From Memphis's, I don't really understand the Celtics getting Vooch at all. To me, Vooch is a guy in a playoff series. He's going to get attacked over and over again. I know he can shoot a little bit, so maybe you can say he's the poor man's offensive Porzingis and the poverty-stricken man's Porzingis on defense. And maybe he's an upgrade over Luka Garza, but I don't think that moves the needle, in all honesty, for the Celtics very much. So it is what it is. And then the other trade that happened was the Pistons dealing Jaden Ivey uh, to the Bulls, which I think for Chicago, that's a good pickup in terms of Ivey's potential as an athlete and as a high pedigree guy who was drafted, I think, number 5 overall by Detroit. And then Detroit gets Kevin Herter. I don't know what version of Kevin Herter am I getting. A couple of years ago in Sacramento, he was really good. Since then, he's been, I would say, pretty blah as a shooter. Again, good player, but does he make Detroit suddenly any more of a favorite than they might have been in the Eastern Conference? I don't really think so. I like the Ivy going to Chicago part of it as much as any part of that deal. So we will see. There's still some more stuff that could happen. That's my quick take on all those. And again, the big news obviously is Harden to the Cavs. And whew, I mean, if this is all they do, it's just it's a disaster in every way, shape, or form. And if there's one more deal to be had, and part of Giannis wanting to come to Cleveland is the fact that we have a Harden Mitchell backcourt, and that makes the Giannis deal feasible and able to happen, then great, and we'll see how it goes. But if this is all the Cavs do, man, it's going to be a disappointment to watch come mid-April once the playoff rolls around, because we all know how this movie's going to end.
Yeah. So we'll just have to wait and see, Mike. Come on,
We
coming
will.
attractions.
We will.
So I think obviously it's going to be interesting. Like I don't know if they're going to play tomorrow. If that would be really wild. That'd be really wild if Harden played tomorrow. I don't think Garland will play tomorrow, but that'd be really wild if Harden plays tomorrow. But we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, the Cavs have not officially announced the trade, neither have the Clippers. So it's not been a fit. I mean, and I don't even know the NBA's like posted like the room, trade supposedly happening, but they haven't actually said it. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. It's very convenient that they're playing the Clippers tomorrow. So you would think that a physical can happen tomorrow and be done with it. So we'll have to just wait and see once it's finally cleared. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what it looks like for the Cavs and going forward. And we'll come back next week and, I'm sure we'll have some stories to tell, I guess. So,
All right, can I ask you one last question?
okay, yes, please.
This is the last question. Did the Clippers discussed the trade with James Harden prior to making it? And is James Harden excited to be coming to Cleveland? Obviously, he
Well,
has
he had to waive the
worn out
trade.
his welcome
He
slash
he had
quit.
he had to waive his trade kicker, Mike, in order for this trade to happen. And he basically has a de facto no trade clause in his contract. So they had to talk to James Harden. There had been room. I mean, Shams had reported that James Harden and them had been talking. Now, once again, that's just rumors. We don't the Clippers, but supposedly, you know, this had happened where they kind of were like having conversations for the last week about the future. And, I find it kind of odd that we didn't hear anything about it until 11 p.m. last night, but there had to be some triggering event. And with the whole trade kicker, there's no way that Harden was not looped in on this. Now, what I would be interested to know is, had the Cavs talked to Mitchell? Had the Cavs talked to, I don't really know that I think Mitchell's the only guy you need to talk to, right? Because he's the guy. All right. So how much did the Cavs talk to Mitchell? Because like literally yesterday, when they announced Mitchell as the player for the, or was it yes no Sunday, when they announced Mitchell as the reserve, like Garland was sharing on Instagram congratulating him and things like that. So like obviously at that point, I don't think Garland nor Mitchell had any clue that this was a possibility 2 days ago. That's more interesting to me than the Clippers thing, because I think the Clippers thing has at least been reported on, that they had been talking for like the last week or so about things. So
Well, let's just hope we get the best version of James Harden for whatever's left in this season, and that somehow, hoping against all hope, that his 17-year track record somehow gets thrown out the window and he actually has a playoff run that is similar to what he's capable of doing in the regular season. So it remains to be seen. It will be a very interesting next 48 hours to see whether or not the Cavs are able to do anything else to bring someone or bring a specific someone to their team, and then what this is going to look like for the remainder of the regular season and then on into the playoffs. If nothing else, it certainly shakes things up. And like I said, as much as I do not want James Harden on this team, I do not think that the previous version of the Cleveland Cavaliers was going to win an NBA title. So, worst case scenario, we're no worse off than we were before, at least in terms of the ultimate goal of trying to win a title. And who knows, if getting Harden somehow leads to getting Giannis, then I'll figure out a way to deal with my dislike of James Harden and
maybe
go
we'll
from
wake
there.
up
My,
tomorrow in
my
a really good mood, Mike. Maybe we'll wake up tomorrow morning in a really good
maybe,
mood.
maybe, maybe. Well, if that happens, we'll definitely have an emergency pod tomorrow night, the next night, some night, if the Cavs are actually able to pull off one more deal and somehow bring Giannis to town. So we shall see. It will be a very interesting, like I said, next 48 hours as we head towards the trade deadline on Thursday. So thanks for checking out this Cleveland Cavaliers, James Harden, Darius Garland edition of the Hoopheads podcast. And we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.